So, ladies and gentlemen of the Batverse, the Batman family out there, welcome to a brand new The Batman 2/The Batman Universe video. By the time you're watching this, just like if you've seen another video this week, I am on a little vacation, so I pre-recorded a couple of videos, and I thought, you know, what's more fitting than to do another The Batman video. So, you know, what I'm going to do today is a bit of a hybrid. Since a lot of you enjoyed my video last month in where we did a bit of a reaction on some Batman, the behind-the-scenes kind of stuff, we're going to do another one of those initially, something I haven't reacted to before on the channel, and then in the back half of this video, we're going to go over the usual discussion series questions. Also, from Future Boba here, since we've had that recent news with Matt Reeves teasing the plot for Part 2, going into this deeper corruption to the point of which Batman couldn't even anticipate, I'm going to chuck in a couple of questions to do with what that could be about, the Court of Owls speculation. Also, I'm going to go over some other details from the SFX magazine interview with Matt Reeves and Lauren LaFranc on some stuff with the Penguin. So that's going to be in the back half somewhere. It's kind of like a all over the place video of Batman galore, so hope you guys enjoy. So let's get into the reaction of this particular behind the scenes and just do a bit of commentary and see where it takes us. I'm ready.
I don't think Bruce, he just doesn't care about surviving at all.
I don't care what happens to me.
He just wants to inflict pain, inflict like his kind of form of justice, which is kind of questionable justice. I always just get the impression that he just wants to keep recreating the night where his parents died.
It's getting serious.
Just to pause that there, I do like that take, you know, with Batman going out there, especially before he learns what he learns at the end of the movie. You know, vengeance won't change the past for me, for anyone, and he grows. He wants to be out there for, you know, people to have hope in Gotham. In the early days, in a lot of Batman iterations, I do like what Robert Pattinson's interpretation of that is, in terms of how, sure, it's not just about one thing. He does want to make a difference in Gotham, but also there is a bit of like when he's going out there, especially Robert Pattinson's take and what we saw in Matt Reeves' vision, there's a sense of almost trying to recreate that night where his parents died. He can never go back and change the past again, which is kind of what he learns, but he's still initially stuck in this kind of repetition, this you know, perpetual cycle of, even though he's convincing himself and there is a larger mission, when he's in the thick of it, it's like, I was powerless that night in Crime Alley, but here they're going to feel the wrath of who I am currently now, and I wish I could have brought that wrath to that night in Crime Alley, but I obviously couldn't because I was like a 10, 11-year-old kid. But now, my God, I'm going to assert that vengeance when and where I can.
Bruce.
If I can't have an effect, I don't care what happens to me.
Looking for vengeance. So I guess we're getting really into that.
You were only a boy, Bruce.
Oh God, the copyright.
I could see the fear in your eyes.
Alfred?
I didn't know how to help.
Alfred's not really equipped emotionally to deal with suddenly having to raise a child. He tries to teach him how to be a man, and so he's sort of partly responsible for what Bruce Batman has become. And I got this from the comics. Alfred was the one who taught him how to defend himself. Alfred was the one who gave him these tools, and that came from him being able to fight as somebody who was former MI6.
Okay, yeah, so we have really lightly touched on this before, and in my opinion, honestly, and this changed over time, we had the Batman prequel novel, which is I think it even says on the prequel novel book at the bottom, inspired by the Batman movie, but I mean, some of you may disagree with me here, but I think that I don't want to quite call it fan fiction, because it is kind of a companion piece, but I do think it's very loose canon. I don't think it's official canon, even though lots of people want it to be, because in the Batman prequel novel, you know, it does very much so fit into the events of the film. Obviously, you take all that into account. You get into Edward Nashton, the Riddler, when he was younger, you know, almost crossing paths with Bruce. You have Bruce on the streets getting to know, you know, a couple of particular characters, but like through the car racing that he was doing. There's a lot of development into who Bruce becomes later on in life to be where he's at being the Batman in the movie. There's all kinds of things like him, picking gum off the streets, at his chemistry station, looking into it, anything he could do. He went to college and different colleges or universities around the world, and that's how he got his martial arts training in. But honestly, if ever I get an interview with Matt Reeves, I'll ask him if he's aware of the prequel novel, which I think he would be, but I would say, is that strict canon? And I would mention how Bruce went to train here and there, and that fits in with kind of super traditional canon of Batman training. But I honestly think, as of where it stands in Matt Reeves' mind, that Bruce just got trained by Alfred. Alfred is very capable, as he says here. Like, it does make sense. He's former MI6. He's been training after his parents' death. He probably started sparring with him then. And then if you think about it, year after year, after year after year, after decade, you would get really good at like mixed martial arts and, combat trained by a former MI6, member. So I believe the competency of Bruce's fighting, but I do think it's limited to Alfred, despite what the prequel novel states. I know some people will argue saying, well, he could have still done that with Alfred and still done the college thing around the world. But whenever you've heard Matt Reeves talk about it, he strictly keeps it to Alfred. So I don't know. It is something that isn't confirmed right now, but I don't really view the prequel novel as strict canon. But let me know what you think about that.
I could teach you how to fight, but I wasn't equipped to take care of you. You needed a father.
The copyright. The
All
copyright.
you had was me.
It didn't make its way into the script because it just didn't fit. But originally, part of their relationship was sparring. So that as they, the idea was after he comes home after a night of being out in the city, he and Alfred were meant to spar. And it didn't end up making its way through the draft. It just didn't work with the scenes that I had. It didn't fit. But it is in...
Just to pause again there, again, we've heard about sparring, and I think a lot of you, whenever we've done the discussion series over the past few years, you want to see sparring in part 2 between Alfred, and it's nice to know that legitimately was going to be a thing, but it just didn't really fit in with like maybe the pacing of the movie, the scenes to scene kind of thing. But Matt Reeves still believes that is what happens. It's kind of crazy. Like after a night of coming back being Batman in Gotham, he would then, before going to sleep during the day, still spar with Alfred? That's nuts. Like, you would have thought it'd be something that would happen before he goes out rather than afterwards. But yeah, I really do like that idea. And if anything, it reinforces to me that it's still just Alfred that trained Bruce, and he's still honing and perfecting his skills, keeping himself sharp all of the time. And I do hope that they can fit that in part 2, especially as well with Alfred and Bruce's relationship being probably the best it's been in a very, very long time after they, had those scenes in the movie where they got quite a bit closer.
In my mind, something that does happen.
He's taught Bruce how to fight, and then Bruce has just kind of taken what was the only thing Alfred thought he could teach him and just taken it to this extreme extent where now Alfred thinks he's going to die because the only thing he thought was a good idea.
I wanted
Batman. I could kind of understand what Alfred was doing. Like, there's no way he would have predicted that he would become a masked vigilante. But after his parents literally got murdered in front of him, he wasn't emotionally equipped to be a parent in the traditional way. So being super close, like a father and a son ideally should be. But he was still a guardian to Bruce. So he thought, okay, so what can I do if I'm not so much of like a family fatherly figure? I can teach this boy to have self-defense, maybe take his aggression and work through his issues of doing combat, since I am a former MI6 member. So that makes sense, but obviously I like how you can, look at the movie if you were to watch it again, maybe you already had these considerations anyway, but you see Alfred and he probably feels a bit of guilt about what Bruce has become because he might think it's a bit of a ticking time bomb that Bruce may very well die doing what he's doing. So he's still supporting him in all the best ways, because what can you do at that point? Like, sure, he's probably had a conversation like, hey, should you really be Batman? But where we pick up in the Batman movie, being 1 year, 6 months in, but they probably would have already had those conversations, and all that's left for Alfred to do is to support Bruce, help with the code cracking, do this, do that, spar with him after a night out in the city, but also keep getting on his ass about not neglecting Wayne Enterprises and stuff. But yeah, I like how much this fills in Alfred's character as well, and that's one of the top requests that I think I've seen from you guys and myself, that I do want quite a bit more Andy Serkis exploration in part 2, and I think that's only natural as well with regards to, again, where they have developed in the first movie between both characters.
To be a really effective street fighter, and I
Yes.
wanted him to have a version of mixed martial arts where he'd adapted various forms just out
I
of
love that
efficiency
concept
in order
art.
to be able to survive on the streets.
So we just basically overlap this whole motion here? Yeah.
When I was looking for a stunt person, I met with Rob Alonzo, and he and I just really connected, and he was a fighter.
My role in this film is making sure that it's not action for the sake of action, that it always drives the story forward.
Yeah, and I really do like, I think people, I don't know if I could say this is, a lot of people saying this, but a lot of people say that the combat isn't good, but I think it's because they want more of it, possibly. I think the combat, the hand-to-hand combat, like the MMA style of Batman, is great, like a street fighter. But I completely understand wanting to see more in part 2. But the hand-to-hand combat, I really, really like how they did it, because it's really raw. It's not like stiff like Bale, where you're kind of slow. Obviously, Ben Affleck, warehouse scene is really, really cool and ideal. But this is kind of like a hybrid of, again, multiple martial arts being used that Bruce is harnessed, so he's kind of constantly improving. So I think they did a really good job. I think it would just absolutely, go down so well if they extended a scene even more. Again, as I always say, just one or two more scenes like the train station fight in like part 2 would probably fill that desire that fans have of wanting to see a bit more Batman fighting. Because I understand, first and foremost, these are, detective-driven, point-of-view-driven Batman movies with, a heavy focus on the narrative and investigation. But of course, Batman is Batman, and they need combat in it, and we got that. But I don't think they would be sacrificing what Matt Reeves is going for through the structure of the story if they included a couple of more scenes of action. And of course, action isn't just limited to hand-to-hand combat. We had the Batmobile chase scene, and there's going to be most obviously likely another one of those in part 2. But I do think it's important to, again, as I say, add one or two more train station-esque fight scenes, equivalent of that is in part 2, to just, satiate that desire of people wanting to see this badass combat that they've done for the movie just on display more and more and more.
It's between dramatic dialogue sequences right into blended action. In describing Batman's fighting style in this iteration of Batman, this is a very in-your-face, brutal, realistic approach.
When he does strike, he strikes out with a lot of power. When we brought in the fight guys, we made sure that they understand that the reactions that they were going to be given were just brutal.
Yeah. I want to see
Punishing them.
I want to see that. So I want to see more. I want to see more brutality. And I know, with Bruce growing by the end of the first film, I think some people interpret that as Bruce is going to hold back maybe in his combat, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Like, I still think the fight scenes we're going to see are going to, just like how he used the baseball bat in the Iceberg Lounge. If there's another opportunity like that, I think he's going to do that. I think he's still going to be pretty brutal. Maybe there won't be the one or two extra punches he did where you can hear like the skull crack or whatever in the first movie. So you could argue that might be something they addressed through how Bruce has grown. But he is still Batman, and Batman does go pretty hard. And if he has to get information out of you, you're not going to die if he kind of twists your wrist and it breaks or like fractures a little bit. Like, I still don't think there's any issue with that, because that's just kind of a lot of who Batman is at times, So yeah, oh man, I really do gush over this combat, and especially hearing the stunt coordinators talk about it, because they did a fantastic job.
He's doing corporal punishment on everyone. He is judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah, it's so badass.
We trained Rob in a way that he is always reacting to the performers around him as opposed to anticipating the movement.
Okay, yeah.
And it felt way closer to a real fight. You're really watching the person who you're fighting with.
I really love that explanation. You know, to do stunt, you know, and fight hand-to-hand, you know, choreography on the movie to make it believable, you know, like, okay, you've been trained by Alfred, MI6 kind of combat level training, you've got experience on the streets as Batman. The way to do that in a movie that makes it really good and feel realistic and authentic is to not do the kind of stunt training that you sometimes see in movies, albeit it can be pretty entertaining, but sometimes you can tell it is more of like a dance or something that is choreographed like a dance rather than really the actors feeling like, oh, this punch is coming towards me, so I'm not just going to move 2 seconds beforehand. You're actually going to be like, okay, I'm going to catch that fist as you do it and turn it, like react to what is coming your way. So that's why I think they show sometimes Batman in the Iceberg Lounge getting punched from behind, or like then he just turns, you know, it's reactive. It's not like suspend your disbelief. Batman somehow knew that punch was coming behind his head and he dodged as if he had eyes in the back of his head. Do you know what I mean? Like, I really like that realism of what we saw. And, you know, even outside the Iceberg Lounge at the train fight scene where there's like 5-6 different thugs, I like Batman getting hit because he is a man in a suit at the end of the day. And he is very, you know, expert in what he's doing with fighting, but it shows his ability to endure during a fight, taking some damage, but also his badassery through powering through it and still overcoming multiple targets, you know? So I love that explanation of how they really were concentrating on not anticipating the move so much, but reacting to it. And I think that makes it a lot more visceral.
Rather than thinking, okay, I memorized it like a dance.
I love that.
You're like, wow, that's Rob Pattinson doing his own stunt fight there, hitting that guy 2 extra times. That guy is scary. That's Batman. But
yeah.
It's also, Batman's arc is he represents justice for us. He's got to learn that. And beyond justice, as Matt wrote, he's got to become something more. His arc was he had to find what that more was.
Yeah.
He has to provide hope to the city.
Gotham is in a world of hopelessness.
Give me the money!
When you're in that world, you're gonna fight as hard as you can.
Yeah.
I gotta do this my way.
I absolutely... By the way, I don't know if I've talked about this enough before, but it might actually be one of my favorite, like, snippets from the movie, where he goes off to Selina, he's like, right, I gotta do this my way, I'm gonna, like, put my cable on here, and I'm just, like, you see how he initially actually just jumps off the building, knowing that he's gonna land on, like, the side beam, and then run down it. I wish we saw a bit more of that scene. Maybe that would have taken away from the coolness of it, because if you zoomed out even further to a wider shot, you just see him continuing to run. But it just shows you how bold he is as Batman in year 2. Like, sure, like he was a bit more of a, I don't know if I would say amateur with the wingsuit, because obviously he had some experience having jumped off the GCPD building beforehand to do that. But there's not as much fright here with jumping off this building. I guess because he knows he's tethered, and logically it can make sense with him running down that he's not going to die because he's literally tethered. But I don't know. I feel like, again, with everything that makes the Batman unique, really concentrating on character-driven, point-of-view-driven detective stuff, 1 or 2 more train station fight scenes, but more little bits like this, where you just, right, I'm going to jump off the building and start running down. I imagine like 3 or 4 scenes like that, or kind of scenes like that in the movie, you would just be kind of like really swept aside, like, damn, like, he is so cool. And we got that from the first film, but again, if you're upping the... You know, if you're really pushing things forward, like they're going to do in part 2 and we've heard about already, that is something I'd be like, okay, we've got that scene, 2 more of those at least. We've got these fight scenes. Okay, maybe not like a super long one, but if we're going to do more, like at least 2 more of those. And then it just really, as you should do with a sequel, build and build and build. Don't shoot like for another galaxy and overwork yourself to some, because, you know, then you might be aiming too high, but definitely naturally improve on what worked really well. And in a grounded, realistic Batman, I like how something like this seems so crazy, because it's like, oh my god, imagine if somebody did that, to the point of where it almost feels unrealistic, but it's like, no, that isn't. Like, you can tether yourself and just boldly do that if you have the confidence to do that, and that is who Batman is. And just seeing that again in the second film, but just with other examples and other imaginative kind of things that are like this, that would really, I think, help. There'd be little subtle things that would really impress fans more and more. So cool.
I tried to find a way to come up with signature moments for the fights so that they were emblematic of who this iteration of Batman was.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a total technical precision. He's fighting like a street fighter, but a street fighter who knows what he's doing. You can see that he's cobbled together a fighting style, and it feels really like this guy who is looking for vengeance.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm hiding in the shadows.
But I am the shadows.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so good. It is so good. Oh, man. I love these little clips like this. Let me know any and all thoughts with regards to what we just discussed there. But let's now move on to a couple of discussion series questions here based off of some recent news as well. So we have Leo Hallen 7675 saying here, if the Court of Owls are being set up in the sequel, I think that the Waynes would have to be the former members, as they are as close to Gotham royalty as you could get. And regarding the clues, I think that Martha wasn't as insane as people made her out to be, and that Thomas Wayne was fully aware that she wasn't because he was trying to protect her from the court. So, yes, this could be another seed that I neglected to mention in the other video. If you don't know what I'm talking about with seeds, in the SFX magazine, Matt Reeves says that all the seeds are in part 1 for what could be going on in part 2. And I went over as many seeds as what I could think of at the time. But there is another one, and that is the Arkham's deaths. And that is obviously Martha's parents, because in that Riddler expose video that he showed on the News to Gotham, or the Gotham News played with Bruce watching, sure, we had the whole Edward Elliot thing, the whole hush money payment, how obviously that can go into other things such as Edward Elliot's son, Thomas Elliot, but another thing is, of course, the whole murder, self-delete, YouTube's freaking guidelines and all that, of Martha's mother and father. And you can probably guess where I'm going with this, and I couldn't believe that I didn't think about it before, because I almost feel like pretty damn good about this seed, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I really don't. But what if Martha's mother didn't kill her husband and then herself, but they were in fact killed? And kind of going off what Leo's just said here, what if, Martha going in and out of institutions all her life, as the Riddler said himself in that video on the news, wasn't really down to her mental health? I'm not saying, by the way, it's still totally possible that she could have suffered with mental health issues, but what if she was put away because she knew the truth that her mother didn't kill her father and then kill herself, but the court or the powers that be put her away, and that was just some whole different gap in time with things that Thomas and Martha had to deal with. Eventually they came round on top. Maybe they figured something out with the court. I'm really just spitballing ideas at this point, because the main thing I want to talk about is really that what if Martha's mum, the Arkhams, didn't, kill her husband, didn't kill herself, and that it was the Court of Owls. Now, the very fact that Martha would have got out of that, though, with Thomas, would and could possibly mean that Thomas and Martha Wayne could have had ties with the Court of Owls. Maybe they were complicit in such a way where they felt like they couldn't really not be in this group. Maybe they put up with a lot of pressure for a long time. So for argument's sake here, let's just say they did actually section Martha because she was threatening to expose the truth, being I know my mom didn't do this, but through everything that she endured, maybe she eventually submitted to, what the court were threatening, saying, we can keep you here, just like that. Thomas tried, Martha tried, perhaps, but ultimately, they kind of had to go along with being silent about it, and I guess being good subjects. I know I'm kind of going all over the place at the minute, because this idea is fairly raw in my mind, and through the Court of Owls pressure, maybe they were somewhat forcefully inducted. If, for all we know, they've been trying to induct them for a while. So it doesn't inherently make Thomas and Martha Wayne evil co-conspirators of the Court of Owls. Maybe they were there because they had no other choice. And I mean, that kind of attitude as well could have been also eventually what got them killed, because that was one of the seeds that I mentioned in my previous video. We know that Maroni wasn't the killer of the Waynes, even though Falcone pointed the finger there in that conversation with Alfred Alfred Pennyworth in hospital with Bruce Wayne, he kind of said, no, like, well, it wasn't Maroni, and pointed the finger more at Falcone, because obviously after Thomas Wayne found out that Edward Elliot was killed, when, you know, he only wanted Falcone to put the fear of God into Edward Elliot, he was distraught, went to the police. So, you know, that very night, him dying does look very suspicious for Falcone, but Alfred admitted, like, he can't be sure. It could have been a random thug on the streets who pulled the trigger, you know, a bit too impulsively kind of thing. But what if it wasn't that? And it all ties back to a place, as Matt Reeves said, to a point of where Batman couldn't even anticipate in the first film, because it was actually somebody else who killed the Waynes, and that could have been the court. And this lies into this deeper corruption, because it goes back in history beyond like the first movie's corruption. It's almost like making sense to me. It's like, okay, sure, you got the first movie's corruption, all the institutions and pillars of Gotham, the officials being exposed, the DA, the commissioner, and this, that, and the other. But a way to get into deeper corruption would be, you know, going back to like the, you know, arguably founding families, or like the important families of Gotham's history. And that would be, you know, the Waynes, but also the Arkhams. And Martha's parents were obviously the Arkhams, and there was a whole murder kind of self-delete thing that could have really been a framing. Because when you look at those photos now, it's like, sure, that could have been what Riddler said it was, but it's also like, well, that gun could have been put in Martha's mother's hands and framed to look that way. And I'm not saying I'm right on the ball here. This idea may be complete BS, you know, as usual here. Who knows? But we know what we're working with Matt Reeves' teaser, and I think that would be something in the first movie, to the point of where Batman couldn't even anticipate, that he learns about in the second film, like this deeper corruption. Why is the city this way? Well, maybe the Arkhams actually did get killed, rather than a murder self-delete thing that Riddler thought happened, and that's as far as what Bruce knows happened as well, and actually the whole city at this point. Now, does it extend to the Waynes? Maybe. I know some people would like their death to be left ambiguous, but you could easily tie that in. But somewhere in everything I just said, maybe figure it out and expand it yourself down in the comments below. Could one of the seeds that Matt Reeves was referring to, that ties into the deeper corruption in part 2, actually go back to the Arkhams and Martha's parents, and how that could link into why Martha was in institutions? Maybe she wasn't actually so crazy. Obviously, Thomas Wayne could have been aware of all of this. They tried to navigate it as best as they could, and eventually maybe it caught up with them for one reason or another. I don't know, but I really do feel it in my bones, without trying to get too far ahead of myself and definitely not set up any expectations, that there may be a little inkling of something here with the Arkham's deaths not being what the Riddler presented. There's some other details that I wanted to quickly cover from the SFX magazine. Some stuff that is pretty interesting, actually, with regards to Oz. So they say they never got around to changing his name in the comics like they did with the Riddler, going from Edward Nygma to Edward Nashton, from an unreal name to a real name, says producer Dylan Clark. By doing that, they grounded the character. We had a lot of conversations with DC Comics and Jim Lee. They had thought about changing his name at some point, but had never done it. Matt asked, can I call our character Oz Cobb? And Jim said, absolutely. So we got a blessing from the king himself. That small change of the name allowed us to look at this character in a grounded way. What? Like, so... This has to be new, otherwise I'm having memory loss. But I know he's called Oz, but correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, I thought it was Oz Cobblepot as per traditional canon, but they're saying here that in the canon of the Batverse, it is literally Oz Cobb. You know, how's it going? My name's Oz Cobb. I don't know if I like that as much as Oz Cobblepot. I get what they're saying, like, you know, hey, you know, let's ground it a bit more, call him Oz Cobb compared to Oz Cobblepot. But yeah, his name is Oz Cobb. Oz Cobb. I don't know if I could take that as seriously. So Lauren LaFranc says here, Matt's created new canon in his film, and I'm creating new canon in this show. We have characters you're familiar with, but there's a different spin on them. It felt like in the Gotham City that Matt created in his film, Cobblepot seemed less of a real person in the way that Cobb is a real last name. He's a gangster, and it just kind of felt more correct. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I do in one way. I totally get, like, yeah, Cobb is a real last name. You can call him Oz Cobb. I get what they're doing because traditionally his name is Cobblepot, so you can make it just Cobb. But I don't know if it had to be that deep. Like, even though this universe is grounded, he could have still been Cobblepot. It's not as out there, in my opinion, as Nigma. You know, Edward Nigma, even though Nashton is an accurate name to the Riddler anyway. But yeah, I don't know if this was necessary, but I get why they did it. But I still can't get over Oz being like, hey, my name's Oz Cobb. How's it going, man? Now, as I continue here, as Oz maneuvers himself into place for a power grab, he enlists a protege, tenement kid Victor Aguilar, played by Renzi Feliz. Batman gets Robin, smiles LaFranc. Doesn't Oz deserve his own boy wonder? Obviously, Victor's not a boy wonder. He's different and deeper than that, but that was the early machinations of how I conceived him. Did she just say Batman gets a Robin? Did she just confirm Robin in part 2? Obviously not, but yeah, they're jesting. I've made this joke myself. Even before she was saying this, I was saying that Victor is so evidently the Robin to Penguin's Batman. And as Lauren LaFranc says here, I think of Victor as the heart of our show in a lot of ways. Seeing Oz as a mentor helped us unlock doors as to who this man is. Victor really is our way in as an audience to Oz. Funnily enough, I said the exact same thing in my trailer breakdown when looking at Renzi Feliz's Victor. I said he's going to be kind of experiencing things in, like, being tossed in the deep end of this criminal underbelly, just like we are as the audience, looking and learning about everything in the same way Victor is. And the last quote that I liked is that I liked the idea that Oz, because of his mother, respected women. He sees Sophia as an equal in a way. He's very intimidated by her, and he respects her and her intelligence. Even though they're very different and come from different worlds, they're cut from the same cloth. Kristen is incredible. She has that rare quality as an actor where she's known for comedy, so she has incredible comedic timing. But she's full of depth and has great drama chops. This felt perfect for her in that she can do both, and she can really poke at Oz in a unique way. So what I really liked about this is that it kind of reminded me of that deleted scene with Oz and Selina. I've brought this up a few times, but he does... Like, he's not like... Oz is a sleazy character, don't get me wrong, but in that deleted scene, like, he wants to help out Selina, he wants to give her money, and, you know, she shuts him down, like, I don't need your money, Oz, and I think that hits a bit of his insecurity, and he says something like, what, am I not good enough for you? And then he goes on to a bit of a monologue saying, I know a lot of people don't see it, but Falcone's not going to be around forever, and this city's going to be mine. But up until that point, or even throughout that, like, he was never disrespectful to Selina. He wanted to help her out, and he cared about her. And if anything, I almost felt a bit of empathy because of Selina just, you know, nicely saying, I don't need your money, Oz. He took that as a, you know, a bit of a wound, because I think that's just in the psychology of the Penguin. He's always been feeling not good enough, people underestimating him, and this is almost a little facet of that when he had that rejection in where all he was doing was extending a helping hand. So, you know, I think what Lauren LaFranc is saying there makes sense. Like, because of his mother, who's a big part of this show, he has quite a bit of respect for women, and thus this extends to Sophia. You know, some other gangsters out there might not take her so seriously, and I'm willing to bet that would be like Johnny Vitti and the remnants of the Falcone crime syndicate, who probably don't want her or her brother to take over from their father's place. But Oz sees her and respects her, even to the point of an equal, and I just absolutely can't wait to see those two together in the show. But I would love to know any and all thoughts with regards to the remaining details coming out of the SFX magazine, and what do you guys think of, hey, my name's Oz Cobb? It's going to take a while for me to digest that one, I think. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave this there. Let me know what you thought of what we discussed in the reaction part, and also some of these bonus discussion series questions at this part of the video. I will be taking a peep in the comment sections and talking with you guys about it. But if you got to this part of the video, you know what I'm going to say. I really appreciate you if you hit the like button. Consider subscribing for more Bat content on the channel. I do want to emphasize, I would love to see a lot of you here for the Penguin breakdowns, you know, because this is the first tangible live action canonical stuff we've got set after part 1. So there's so much that we can look into, talk about, you know, possible setup, teases, larger exposition. I'm going to be all about that. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. But until next time, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. I'll see you soon. I'll be back relatively soon by the time you're seeing this. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.